Hello and welcome to the Outtakes, the official podcast of National Student Pride. Here I'm joined with Juno Dawson, a best-selling writer. This is the podcast where we go behind the scenes with some amazing queer people doing some amazing things both inside and out.
Amazing queer things.
Amazing queer things. It's just queer. So Juno, I do want to get into a lot of your activism and writing, but I think I read online that you're a big fan of the Spice Girls.
Yes, it
Absolutely.
is one of the most defined my life. Yeah.
I'm a big fan as well, so I guess the first question is, what is your favourite Spice Girl, and both then and now, and has it changed?
Yes, that's exactly the right way to ask that question.
Yeah, because there's two different answers for me.
Yeah, so it was always Posh Spice, right from Midnight Miss Suki throughout, and I still don't know, I still love Victoria Beckham. I am wearing Victoria Beckham eyeliner as we speak, product placement. But now I think if knowing what I know and sort of working in the industry that I work in, I've been in closest proximity with Mel C, and Mel C is such a phenomenal ally to all of the LGBTQIA community. Her collaboration with Sing the Pink, I think, has been an education for her, and I think she would admit that. And I think now that I'm a bit older, and now that I've worked in sort of film and TV for a while, I think Mel C is the one I want to go for a drink with.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were like an OG Posh Spice?
Always.
Was it because of just the audacity to go on stage and just sort of point with
Yeah, I like an underdog, and I've always liked an underdog, and Victoria was the odd one out, in that the others had a very similar energy, and then Victoria just had
a dark, polished,
but also a very dark humour.
Yeah,
So
she is sharp.
So
she is
funny.
So funny. Every interview that she has with David, she is carrying it. She does not miss a beat. She's so cool.
I think she's very smart, and so I've still got a lot of time. I'm scared. I've never met Victoria Beckham, and I'm very mindful because they do say, be careful, don't be heroes. But so I think I probably would still go on with Victoria. It's just that Mel C is so immersed in the queer scene now. She's the one that I feel like we just have the most to talk about. So.
Well, she was also the most punk one as well, and she always got painted with the brush of the lesbian because she was sporty tomboy. But I think I've always been like a ginger spice. I don't know. It's probably a very basic sort of go-to, but I just thought she was so fiery and cool.
Well, as well, I think what's really, really evident is they were not the Spice Girls without Jerry.
No, she was the branding machine behind it in a way. It's so crazy.
She got it. She gets pop music.
She gets it. Was the Spice Girls? Did that impact you as a queer person growing up?
Oh, 100%. Because it essentially for me involved I was sort of outing myself. Because the Spice Girls started when I was 40. At the time, it was well before my transition. So it was a case of, by admitting and being an open, I'm out as a Spice Girl fan. By being out as a Spice Girl fan, that wasn't normal for a little boy. At the time, I didn't know who or what I was, and I wasn't going to figure that out for a long time. Although weirdly, what I knew is that I wanted to be a Spice Girl.
Yeah.
But then the bit that kind of got lost in the process was, no, you just want to be a girl.
Yeah.
You can figure this out, kind of, think it through. And maybe I should have thought it through a bit more, but essentially being a Spice Girl fan meant outing myself, and I don't regret it. So yeah, it was when I wasn't prepared to hide my love for the Spice Girls, basically.
I guess also, we are talking about the Spice Girls a lot, but I think as queer people, we do tend to find people, whether it's pop stars, celebrities, that we can identify with. We use pop culture so much as almost a way to navigate our queerness. And if you look at the Spice Girls, all of them represent a different type of femininity that I think any girl or boy out there can identify with. So I think it's really interesting that helped you almost find your womanhood in a way. Is that been words in your mouth?
I've said that before, and I think people always think I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But I think it goes deeper than that as well. In that actually they were 5 working class women.
Yeah. And
how many in the mainstream media in the 90s? How many working class women did we see on television? And especially when I was a little bit older, and Jerry's first book came out after she'd left the Spice Girls, and it really documents kind of the story of a working class girl who just knew there was something special inside of her. I mean, how queer is that?
Yeah.
That is so queer without being queer.
Yeah. Is that story of the innate otherness, but knowing that otherness is got a twinkle of
And
it's got like a special twinkle to it.
I saw Adele as well when she did James Corden's Carpool Karaoke. He asked her about her love of the Spice Girls, and she said they were 5 girls who got out.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that queer people can really relate to, because we shouldn't need to escape our childhoods, but often we do need to escape it because we've been given a narrative that's not for us. So maybe it's not a childhood that we're escaping, it's the narrative we've been given that we're escaping, that, you know, every child still, you know, it's the way it goes, it's the way our world is set up. When a baby is born, you assume it's cisgender and you assume it's going to be heterosexual, unless you're told otherwise. The default is still straight, the default is still cis. And so when Adele talked about, I didn't know who they were and I didn't know what I wanted to get out of, but I knew I needed to get out. And that really spoke to me, because I knew I was meant for something different. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew I was not meant to lead the same kind of life as my parents. I knew that wasn't for me.
I think also as queer people we often use, whether it's going to university and that sort of motivates you to get good grades because that's almost like your golden ticket to get out of that situation, or whether it is just being successful in your career, like there is always sort of a motivational force of being queer, of I need to find a way to remove myself from this. I think for the most part anyway, I'm sure there are stories out there where like people have been more than accepting, but I think even in them cases there is that need to get out and find yourself on the level.
Yeah.
But,
and it was for me, it was university. And you hit the nail on the head. I knew that I was only getting out of Bingley, West Yorkshire if I got a full complement of A-levels. I didn't know any other way out. I mean, I'm full of respect. I've just done the panel event with Belle Priestley, and you know, she left school at 16 and basically moved. She just brought herself to London at 18 and has built a life for herself. I couldn't have done that. I was much too timid. Like, I needed the structure of university, and also I knew this was a slightly different time as well. We'd been told all through the 90s that the only way you're going to make anything of yourself is to go to university. I don't know if that's true now. I think I've seen other people be very successful without needing university, but for me, it was just the logical route to my destination, and I'm so glad I did it. You know, I was able to completely reinvent myself at university. You know, all the bullying and the shame that had hovered over me at high school didn't follow me to Wales. I went to university in Bangor, and I could completely reinvent myself, and I did it. You know, I realised I was in a place where queerness was cool, because it wasn't a very diverse university. There was an LGBT society, but you know, it wasn't massively. There wasn't a lot of us. It was a very small group. But I was, all of a sudden, I was like the life and soul of the party. And I realised, well, nobody's going to know otherwise. You know, nobody knows that you were a big loser at school. So it was kind of a total reinvention.
Oh, that's amazing. What did you study?
I did psychology, which a lot of people do. But I did that because I genuinely wasn't quite sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. And getting a Bachelor of Science with a social science felt like, well, this covers a lot of bases. And it was fascinating. And actually, I think it was absolutely the right thing for me to do. I think, you know, this always comes out at some point, but you know, I dropped English the second I could. I hated GCSE English so much. It bored the shit out of me. And I would sit before you. Well, I was also shit at maths.
Numbers.
Yeah, gross. Very straight culture. But
very
numbers are very straight.
Vibes,
numbers are straight. And so I dropped English because I was bored. I was good at it, but I was bored. I hated every single book. And I looked at the reading list for A-level English, and I was like, nope, that looks shit as well. Although actually, all my friends did English and it was slightly better, but I think people are always surprised when they find out, you know, I'm a #1 Sunday Times bestselling author who dropped English.
Despised it.
But I think that's nothing to do with me. That's an indication of how shit the curriculum was when I was in school. You know, it was dry as toast with no butter. It was dreadful. Sorry, Apple.
No, because I remember going to school, and I think English for me was a really great opportunity to be able to discuss queerness, whether it was present in books or sort of an undertone reading. It was a way to open up that discourse in the classroom, which I'm not sure it was becoming just more of a thing as like we progress and it just sort of permeates society more and becomes just a wider part of like the discourse. But one thing I did want to ask, you did mention that it took a while to sort of find your gender identity, and it was a bit later on. So when you were at uni, did you sort of use that to explore your gender identity more, or was it a case of like did it take a while? Like what was that like?
It did, and I think contextualise it, I went to college in '99 and graduated in 2002, where trans representation just was nothing.
No.
You know, so it's funny actually. I remember there was a controversy when they decided to change the LGB society to the LGBT society, and I remember being part of that conversation. Broadly, I was dating the chair of the LGBT society, and he was really against. Oh, he's so tough. He was really against adding trans people to the mix because he was like, you know, I don't think being transgender is anything to do with sexuality. And at the time, I mean, I was basically just sleeping with him, and you know, I wasn't particularly politically involved, and I was kind of like, And so there was at that point, even in 2002, there were trans students at Bangor, and then obviously Nadia did Big Brother in 2005.
Amazing.
Iconic.
Amazing.
And so throughout the early noughties, you know, trans representation slowly improved, but I didn't start to meet trans people until the late noughties. And that for me was actually more important than seeing trans people on TV, because it's that seeing it for yourself, seeing with your own eyes that there are trans people living and thriving, and that there is a future for you. And I think that's really, really important, and I hadn't made the connection through film or television. Whereas when I started to meet people like Isla Holden, Paris Lees, I was like, these women are living their lives. I do not doubt their womanhood, I do not question their womanhood. Why are you questioning your womanhood? And so for me, it was actually my real life interactions with trans people. So I was kind of old. I don't think I was like a geriatric transitioner. I think that is the term for it, because I was so old when I started my transition.
Add that to your Instagram post.
Geriatric transitioner.
Drag name. You mentioned Nadia on the Big Brother.
Yeah.
And she won.
She did.
Which I think in the current climate we're in, and there's such a sort of toxic culture war and debate going on. I don't know personally, obviously I'm not a trans person, but I don't see how that could happen, like now in this current, like I think there's just such a vitriol. So I almost think it's crazy how she won almost 15, 20 years back, and how much has it progressed and developed really?
Well, there's a couple of things to draw out of Nadia's Big Brother. The first one is that she was, it's funny, we've all, I think, as a culture, slightly rose-tinted Nadia's time. She was fabulous. The way she was treated on the show was wrong. And, you know, it's when you go back and watch, when anybody was evicted, Davina would sit there and gleefully expose, like, I've got a secret about Nadia, and she would basically out Nadia. And we remember that in that house, Nadia did not talk about being trans. She was stealth. She didn't tell anyone she was trans. You know, and so it was very strange. There was almost this gotcha moment, and of course we'd seen the same gotcha.
It's the whole like.
We need to talk about there's something about Miriam, which was the even more ghastly reality show that came before Nadia, where a group of straight men were tricked basically into dating a trans woman.
This is a big thing with like the whole sort of anti-trans debate, is like the deceitfulness, the trickery.
Yeah.
Right? And it's gone back for like decades.
Yeah, and then TV didn't help with that, and Nadia's journey in the Big Brother house didn't massively help. Obviously, once Nadia came out, she talked very extensively about her transition, and that was a good thing. I think now, weirdly, and there is a massive disconnect between the conversation that's happening in the media and real life people's perceptions of trans people. I think most people just don't care.
Yeah.
Like genuinely. I think, you know, if you are truly going to believe everything you read in a tabloid newspaper, like I don't know if I can really help you with that. Like if you haven't got the critical thinking skills to think that, like, there are fewer than 1 million trans people in the UK. There are probably more big cats in zoos than there are, and I don't know if that's true, but you know, we're such a small community.
You heard it here first.
We've just done a census, you know, that reveals actually there are very, very few sort of trans people living in the UK right now. So honestly, what threat could we possibly pose to the way of life of Britons in this country? And of course the newspapers have got to talk about us, because we can't talk about the actual threat to life in the UK, which was Brexit, which now has left us completely isolated. We're in economic straits, we're in a cost of living crisis. We're just beginning to feel the impact on our food, on our imports and exports. You know, the newspapers which really championed Brexit, they can't put their hands up now and say, oh yeah, we might have real solve, whoops. And so you know, refugees, trans people, you know, who else can we demonise? Muslims, homeless people, travellers. You know, there have always been scapegoats.
Yeah, let's throw this red meat to the vultures to distract from this issue going on.
Because the newspapers have backed a Tory government for 12 years now, and the reason our country is in a state is because of our leaders. You know there are no trans people in positions of power at all. There are no trans CEOs. There are no trans politicians. You know, we have no voice in this country and no power in this country. So what could we have possibly done to affect anybody's life in the UK? The only person my transition has affected is me and my mum and my dad and my sister and my friends, and no one else.
No, because I think that's really well said as well, because I think also a lot of this issue comes from, it's not the trans issue, the issue that other people have, is that we are seeing an increased representation of trans people in the media, so people are becoming more aware of it, it's like integrating more onto their TV screens, into their living rooms, but the support system and framework to protect and support trans people hasn't been put into place.
Again, that is the fault of our leadership.
Yeah.
The NHS, which is wonderful but flawed, you know, should have recognised a long time ago that with increased representation, more trans people felt safe to come out. There is no social contagion. It's not like people who see me on the telly and be like, oh yeah, that looks great, let's sign up. You know, it's just that me. So what it is people can see our lives and they perceive that it's safe for them to follow down a similar path. You know, and it is, you know, and I believe, you know, if things might look bleak, but actually no one can stop you from being yourself. And you know, I've experienced nothing but contentment and joy since I came out. You know, that's how I know I'm trans, because I've only gotten happier. You know, had I started down this path and felt more anxious and more depressed, I would have been, well, maybe this wasn't the right option for you. But actually, the longer I've existed as Juno, the sort of the happier and more, the word I like to use is content. You know, it's not always singing and dancing, but you know,
peace.
Yeah, a more peaceful version of myself. And I think, you know, the way that I transitioned isn't going to be the right way for everyone. No two trans people are the same, but you know, you're right. As a country, we need an infrastructure, but also that a recognition that so what, you know, like I said, it's truly a personal choice, and that's why trans rights are human rights, because it is about the right to exist on this planet in the way that you are most at peace. And you know, if we take away that right for trans people to exist, we take away religious freedoms, we take away gay and lesbian freedoms, we take away the freedom of women to work. You know,
where does it stop?
Where does it stop? And then this is why I call for allyship, and this is why I call for all LGBTQ people to stand together for trans rights, because if we are the lowest hanging fruit, if our rights are rolled back, why would anybody stop there? Why would an authoritarian government stop with trans people? They would, of course, come for abortion rights. Of course, they would come for the right to wear a niqab or a hijab. You know, this is a matter of human autonomy, about freedom.